Hi, welcome to another TeamSense Tuesday webinar. My name is Caroline Rizzo, and today I have the honor of moderating today's panel discussion. Our esteemed panelists each bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise within the manufacturing industries, especially in operations, and I'm excited to introduce them to you shortly. First, let's cover a few housekeeping items. As always, questions are encouraged throughout the webinar. We ask that you place them in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the last section of our time together. As you may have noticed, this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be emailed to all of our registrants via YouTube link in case you have to hop early or would like to revisit the content at a later time. You can always visit teamsense.com/webinars to see all past and upcoming topics as well. So, without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. So, as I mentioned, my name is Caroline Rizzo. I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm part of the marketing team at TeamSense and producer of our webinars. My goal is to learn about topics related to HR and operations as a way to start conversations and learn from experts in the field, which brings me to introducing today's panelists. Welcome, Andy and Adam.
Hey, Caroline.
Morning.
Awesome. So, Andy, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself first? Welcome.
Yep, sure. So my name's Andy Thayer. I'm the general manager for locks at Sargent Manufacturing, which is a division of Assa Abloy. We do commercial, institutional, industrial push bar exit devices and locking hardware. So if you've ever been in a hospital or a public building or something, you might have seen some of the products that we make.
That's fantastic. I tell you, locks are important. I know you mentioned, imagine if you get locked out of a hospital room, how critical that can be. So, thanks again for all of y'all's work.
Yep.
Okay, Adam, would you like to introduce yourself? Welcome.
Yeah, I would. My name's Adam St. Clair. I'm an account executive at TeamSense. That's really just a fancy title, I think, for sales. And I actually used to be in a role similar to Andy's. So I grew up my first 11 years were actually in manufacturing on a factory floor, of various roles within the factory there, but operations is kind of where I got started. And so just a fun, unique position to be in, to be continuing to work with operational leaders, but from a different side of the house. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you. As y'all can tell, I have two very seasoned manufacturing veterans here. I'm lucky that Adam and I get to work together, so I learned a ton from him. So thank you both for joining us today. Let's go ahead and hop into it. So, again, we keep these webinars very conversational, so we'll go off slides here. But I want to jump in and talk a little bit more about your background, Andy. So, obviously, you come from Assa Abloy, Sargent Manufacturing. Can you tell us again a little bit about your role in the company as an operations manager, general manager, and what makes Assa Abloy a really great place to work?
Sure. Um, so my background actually is in operations most of my career. I got started in quality. So I've always been around, manufacturing, assembly, things like that. Spent a lot of time in our supply chain, spent a lot of time developing manufacturing processes, workforces, things like that. Sargent is a great place to work. I love working for Sargent and Assa Abloy because Assa Abloy feels like the smallest large or the largest small company that I've ever experienced. And what I mean by that is it's cool to be able to have an idea, put together a business case, and then have the capital of a large company like Assa Abloy, but then have local control like we do within Sargent. So it makes it a lot of fun to work in a place where you're basically you get the freedom to design your own destiny, as long as, of course, you hit the important metrics and things like that.
Andy, sounds like you should probably plan the next offsite and go to Reno, the biggest little city in the world, and that could be your team, like the biggest small company in the world.
There you go.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's what makes a great organization in terms of working for them. Being able to have that ability to make your decisions, not have to go through so much red tape, but still have a lot of support. So that's fantastic. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit of the relationship with TeamSense. So obviously, you're an operations manager. What were some of the primary goals you hope to achieve when you were implementing TeamSense at your facility? Or, what were some of the pain points that you were experiencing as an operations manager?
So really simply, when we first started taking a look at TeamSense, and actually that's when Adam and I first crossed paths, the problem that we were trying to solve was our previous absence reporting system relied on the person that was going to be out to pick up the phone and call our security guard shack. Now that those calls could come any time of day or night. And then if the security guard was doing rounds, maybe he wasn't at his station, maybe he'd leave a voicemail. We also have several generations of folks with the same last name working here. So whether they wrote the name down correctly would be hit or miss. So basically, it was very difficult for my production managers or direct supervisors to get good information first thing in the morning, who's not planning on coming to work today. And you can imagine that the chaos that not knowing exactly what your workforce looks like when you've got to go in and start moving pieces, it can get interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious about that in particular. And I know, from kind of running my own shift startup meetings, they can all look a little bit different or feel a little bit different. Curious, Andy, the specifics for you or your team. Like what's a typical 30 minutes pre-shift or the first 30 minutes of shift startup specifically around like crewing or attendance or shift alignment? How does that look for you and your teams?
Yeah, so we do a lot of cellular manufacturing, and then we have cell leaders who, and I probably should have explained this, we're a union shop. So the way that our org structure kind of works is we have operators or assemblers, and then they report up into a cell leader, and the cell leader is responsible for laying out the work for them. And then the cell leaders are kind of the line right underneath my production managers or supervisors. So basically, the challenge is when nobody's really sure who's going to be in or who's going to be out, the cell leaders don't know exactly who's going to show up to work or not. So they don't know exactly what work they can lay out. And of course, if one of those cell leaders is out, that adds another little spice to the mix. Or if we've got somebody that runs a critical piece of equipment, or a perfect example. So I think it was yesterday. We have a piece of equipment that's critical. It's our bottleneck for one of our processes that is very important for customer orders lately. We've got two operators who had planned on being out, and the third operator who had planned on being in got in a car accident, broke his ankle on his way into work. And so it was super important that we knew that right then and there, as soon as humanly possible. And frankly, because he was dealing with a car accident and an injury to himself, to make it easy for him to report the fact that he was going to be absent, so that we knew before the shift even started that we were about to have a big problem with that piece of equipment. And we already had the wheels rolling for finding somebody that knew how to use that piece of equipment, that worked in a different department, hasn't run it for years. But that's the kind of band-aid that we could slap on before the shift even started, which was really helpful.
Wow. Okay. So this
Yeah,
employee, he gets it. I'm just trying to envision the chain of events here. He
yeah,
literally texts in through TeamSense reporting his absence after the car accident. You guys got notified
Wow.
ahead of time?
exactly. And it was at like 4:30 in the morning too, which is the extra
Oh
bonus.
man.
Yep. So instead of him having to, call the guard, and to be perfectly honest, when we finally did talk to him, he was not in super good shape.
Of course.
He quite literally he texts TeamSense. It's super easy. Clicks on the link and then just says, "I'm going to be out today." And then we could see that and then react to it, which was cool.
Wow. That's incredible. And for the listeners, that wasn't a teed up story, by the way. So I'm kind of reacting real time to this.
Yeah.
I've heard similar stories though. I've heard of employees communicating. I broke down on the side of the road, and because it's 20 seconds, 30 seconds, this easy communication channel, they're willing to communicate more. And I know from time in ops, like the only thing worse than an unplanned absence and not having somebody that's got a unique skill set to run a critical piece of the operation is vital. But the only thing worse than having an unplanned absence is having a no call no show. Like is he about or she about to walk through the door and everything's about to change, or can I expect or plan or go dust get the dust off of the person who hasn't run that piece of equipment in a while and get the techno workflow up on the screen for them to work through. Like that level of communication just changes operations uh, considerably, having that foresight for sure. So and that's kind of the question here. So help walk through kind of what life was like before and what life is like now. I think that was a really good kind of myopic or specific example. In general, what's life like before and after TeamSense around absenteeism, staffing, and all of that?
So there's kind of two ways that we manage absenteeism. It's kind of planned and unplanned. So if I know that I'm going to be off on vacation next week, I would tell my supervisor and put in a vacation slip and say, "Hey, I'm going to be on vacation next week." It's planned. Okay, great. We put it on the calendar and we know how to schedule and adjust for that. And then there's unplanned, and unplanned can look anything from like I got in a car accident on my way in, or my kids are sick, or I've got a grandparent issue, or any amount of life complexity. And so the way that we use TeamSense is for those unplanned absences. And Adam, I remember early on, we kind of said, all right, we want for communication of absences, we want it to be as simple as possible because it's an hourly union workforce. We have some people that don't own a cell phone. We have some people that can, run circles around me with a cell phone and everything in between. So the beauty of TeamSense is if you're comfortable with a cell phone or smartphone, it's a piece of cake. You send a text, you click a link, and then the way that we've implemented it, you quite literally just say what type of time you want to use, and we'll get here. But we're talking about an integration with our time and attendance system that will code their time automatically, which would be cool. And then what that does once you report it is all of the supervisors have notifications on their cell phones. So they quite literally get a text that says, "Hey, Andy Thayer just reported he's going to be absent today." Or Andy Thayer just reported he's going to be late today. And to your point, Adam, that's where knowledge is power, and knowing that somebody's going to be in or not in either before or right at the start of shift allows us to react accordingly. Pull whatever levers we need to fill that gap.
Yeah, you were talking at the beginning kind of about the series of events, the things that need to be true for the best scenario. Employee needs to pick up the phone, guard needs to be in the shack, they need to pick up the phone, they need to say who their manager is and get that right. Then there has to be this cross-functional communication. Maybe it doesn't happen in the right amount of time, or maybe there's some mix-up of information. So all of these potential failure points along the way. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is like, we've removed the failure points and the time in between, and also potentially increased an employee's willingness or likelihood that they're going to communicate by making it simple, by providing different communication channels for them.
Exactly, because when it's easy, people will do it more consistently. When it's a pain in the butt, and then honestly, it was very difficult to have consequences when people no call no showed when it was the guard because it was a little bit hit or miss. They could use the excuse of nobody answered the phone, and we couldn't prove or disprove. So okay, I don't know exactly what to do there. So holding people accountable was a little tough. Now I know, and like on my cell phone right here, I can tell you who reported an absence this morning in my departments, what type of time they want to use, how to code it, and let's see, the last text that I got this morning was at 4:32, and our shift starts at 5. So I had a 4:32, I had a 4:17, I had a 4:02. That was just for today. So I knew, when I was driving in, who was not going to be here today, so that we can make adjustments first thing right out of the gate and make sure that we got the right people in the right seats.
Mm-hmm.
That makes such a difference. I mean, I think the other piece of it as well, like you said, the accountability piece, you're meeting your employees where they're at by communicating with them in a way that's easy and efficient for them. I just think about kind of the emotional side of it, right? In terms of if someone has an emergency, like, breaking their ankle or their grandparent dies or something happens, I don't want to have to call the security person and talk to them about an emotional thing that I'm going through when it's so much easier for me just to shoot a text. And then I think the other thing we had talked about too was the piece around communication barriers if someone speaks in a different language as well. Can that message be interpreted correctly? And could the employee potentially be dinged if it just wasn't translated properly, right? So I think just automating that, allowing for, obviously, we talk with a lot of HR managers too in these conversations at the webinars that we have, and they kind of take the emotional brunt of working with employees sometimes. And they often comment about the fact that, you know what, We can be empathetic. This actually gives us the opportunity to be proactive and empathetic, especially if an emergency happens. We know it really quickly, we get the information, we can make plans accordingly, but then we can also proactively reach out to the employee and see how we can even help them. So I like hearing that piece of it too. Yeah.
And I know Asa's a lean manufacturing and kind of subscribes to that model, and it's about incremental improvements over time, and it's quantified impact is the goal and the results that I know that each one of your cells and then obviously your entire factory are looking for. Could you unpack just a little bit some of the impact from a production standpoint? So we've talked about, hey, it makes life better. Got it. Where does that show up on some of the daily management, whether you're doing QDIP or you've got KPIs that you're reviewing from a productivity standpoint, monthly, daily, weekly, whatever it is. Where does this show up? Like where does this impact production, productivity targets, KPIs, and metrics?
Sure. So one of the places where we used to talk about, who's here today, who's not here today, was we'd have a kind of shift start meeting with our cell leaders.
Mhm.
And that shift start meeting, you can imagine if you try to pile too many things in there, it becomes a little bit of a productivity suck because then your cell leaders are off the floor when they need to be getting stuff up and rolling. So really what this has enabled us to do is get that communication out to cell leaders like very first thing as the shift is starting so we can adjust. And the way that we measure productivity is it's quite literally just units per man hour off of our production lines. That's how we measure it for each of the individual cells. And that
Mm.
rolls up into earned hours over actual hours, when you get into the more financial metrics, but quite literally just units per man hour. So we know what our targets need to be for each of our cells. So I know if I move a person from one cell to another cell because we've got customer orders that are due or whatever, I can tell you with pretty good certainty what that's going to cost me off of the line that I'm moving them from, and then what it's going to earn me on the line that I'm moving them to. So
Mm.
it allows us to make decisions and kind of balance that productivity versus customer demand for right now today, and do it really quickly and first thing in the morning because you can imagine if we start shift at 5 o'clock, if I don't make personnel shifts until 7 o'clock, I lost 2 hours. You can just bleed time really quickly without even knowing it. And time is either capacity, so losing capacity to fill customer orders, and order fill rate is a big deal for us, meaning customer orders that are filled on time,
Yeah.
or just lose the productivity. Because if I've got a person in a very important seat that the people that are downstream from them can't do anything without them producing,
Yeah.
our workforce, some people will sit there in the chair and do nothing until you make the adjustment. Some people will come and say, "Hey, I don't have any work," but that's not everybody, and that's the reality of the life that we live.
Yeah. So you've got this units man hour ratio. There's obviously a handful of variables that could affect that, right? It could be machine downtime, it could be staffing, it could be a host of things. Do you guys get into that level of kind of root cause analysis when your ratio is off?
Yeah, of
Does the
course.
operation?
Yeah, I mean it's actually fairly simple. I was just working it this morning for a cell because I made some adjustments to staffing just based on who we've got in today. And so it's quite literally we look at what the reason for the downtime is or what the reason for the output miss was.
Mhm.
And so units per hour, it's quite literally units per man hour, which is just assigned hours times people.
Yep.
And so you can change the numerator and the denominator, to whatever ratio you need based on customer demand.
hmm hmm Yeah, and then that's your target, and then when you miss, it kind of facilitates the conversation of why. And
Exactly.
and yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No,
So what percentage of the time, and I know this is kind of off the cuff here, but even just directional number, I'd be interested in. Absenteeism or availability of staffing is one of many variables. Is it 20% of the time that's the root cause? Is it 80% of the time that people and availability of people is the root cause? What's your gut, or what do you know about how often that ends up being the variable?
that's an interesting question. I'm going to say it depends. And it depends on some external factors. Like we're in New England, right? What if it snows tomorrow? What am I going to have for people that show up to work? Or to be perfectly honest, like next weekend or next week is a short week because of 4th of July holiday. That we've got a lot of people taking
Guaranteed.
vacation to make a long week. So next week it's going to be a really big deal. This week it's kind of medium. Last week it wasn't a problem at all. And then when you get into January, February, March, where unexpected snow and my kids' school's closed, or I can't physically get to work because my car's buried or whatever, it's a huge deal for days like that. So the
Mhm.
short answer is it depends. There's a lot of external factors that make it more or less important in certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
that help. I know that's a non-answer, but it's kind of just all of the variables can either go your way or not.
Well, it's not a non-answer. I mean, so take another variable like system downtime or a piece of equipment shuts down. What if you knew 2 hours before, like some blinking light went off and said, I'm going to shut down in 2 hours. I'm not going to be able, like, you could maybe do a little something different. You could get, McKinley or some third party maintenance group on the phone and en route to the factory to get ahead of some things. So maybe that's where it comes in. It's like, hey, we know, like, TeamSense isn't going to eliminate staffing as a potential root cause for our throughput efficiency or our productivity ratio to be off, but we do have some leading indicators that help us get ahead of issues and mitigate the potential impact. So it doesn't go away, but we see it coming and we can do something about it.
Precisely. That's a good way to look at
So, if the Patriots ever make it to the Super Bowl, then
it.
Super Bowl Sunday is probably another time to consider. Okay.
It sure is. I'll
Whole
tell you. The Celtics just had their run a little while ago, so there was a few people that were out after that.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I just immediately thought
That's
about that
right.
because a
That's
lot of
right.
like the lead up to the Super Bowl or Super Bowl Monday, thinking about
Yep.
that. Yeah, that's a good, yeah. So I want to shift gears. I think that was really interesting talking more in terms of productivity impact. Obviously, you mentioned that you are a unionized workforce. We have a lot of people that have relationships with their unions, and that's always kind of an interesting topic to cover for people. And this actually came through. We had a question that came through our Q&A that actually asked this too. So this is a perfect transition point. I'll just actually post the question from the Q&A. This person has asked, tell us about implementation. Did the union try to block? How was employee adoption? How long did it take for change management? So maybe let's kind of dial into the union piece and then we can kind of get into the employee adoption piece. But talk about your relationship with the union and how this was implemented.
Yep. So we have a union. They've been here for a long time. Sargent's been in New Haven for 150 years. The union's been here for a very large part of that. So our union has a very good working relationship with our management team. Now, that's not to say that they love everything that we do and all that. I'm sure you can imagine it's a little give and take. But the way that we initially sold TeamSense and got their buy-in was we showed it to them, and then we explained what we were using it for. So the way that we've implemented TeamSense, it's the sole purpose of it is for employees to communicate to us to tell us when they're going to be out. And that allows us to, number one, appropriately code their time. So if they want to take an unpaid personal day, if they want a vacation day, it allows us to do that. And then we also, you can imagine, have an attendance points system, meaning you can't call out too often, otherwise there's going to be some disciplinary actions. And it makes the repository for that very simple, straightforward, and in one place. If you've called out, it's in TeamSense. If you haven't called out and you've no call, no showed, then there is nothing in TeamSense. It kind of just is what it is. So our union actually saw this as kind of similar to what I do, as a way to make that communication touch point easier for employees. And it's hard to argue against something where the sole purpose is to make it easier for your employees. Now we did have a little bit of a burning platform. We had some frustration with the old system because the guard, was hit or miss. Talking to him was hit or miss. We had some names mixed up between family members, things like that. So we had a little bit of tailwind there that helped out significantly. But our union was not. They didn't resist this at all as we started moving into it.
Hmm. Has there been any drop in like labor grievances as a result? Did
No.
you?
It made attendance tracking for discipline easier for my production managers because now we still have one source of the truth, and that's our TNA system. But when I'm looking to see how often somebody's called out, I can just go into TeamSense, and then you bump it up to the TNA system, and just see exactly what that person's level of discipline is about to be, and that's it. So it's pretty easy.
One of the things at union shops that I get often is like, hey, it says in our CBA that employees have to call, and this is going to mess with the labor agreement. Tell me if there was anything in your guys's that you had to be thoughtful about, any specific language or anything.
There wasn't language like that we had to navigate. But honestly, even if there was, like I've worked in places that was that specific in the agreement.
Yeah.
Sure, you'd have to negotiate it in. But from a company perspective, trying to make things easier for employees, I'd say that that's a little bit of an olive branch or something that would be a good negotiating tactic, not something that you've got to force down people's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have the best interest of your employees, clearly, implementing something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Uh,
oh, sorry, Caroline, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Adam. You're good.
Well, you're the moderator, so I don't want to get overzealous and keep going. If you're trying to say our time is up, do we have more time?
No, yeah. No, we have plenty of time.
Okay.
We still have 17 minutes, so we're
Okay.
totally
Perfect.
good. But yeah, thank you for being cognizant. Now I just wanted to talk a little bit about, the implementation, right? So obviously union thumbs up. Let's think about the employees' adoption. So before we kind of talk about their reaction, I'd love to know a little bit more about how you actually rolled out TeamSense. How did you think in terms of, okay, we have this new technology, we're gonna roll it out. How did you kinda think through that process and that rollout process?
Yeah. So the way that we did it was we started at it was actually at the end of last year was when we were kind of starting conversations with Adam, getting everything set up, taking care of all the pre-communication with the union that needed to happen. And that our goal was for the very beginning of this year to get it rolled out.
Mm.
I think we weren't fully live until February or March. I don't remember exactly. But basically what we did is we had some all hands meetings with all of our employees where we quite literally just put up on the screen what it looks like on their phone and the phone number, how to do it.
Yeah.
We gave them a little bit of a handout if they wanted instructions to follow along with afterwards. And then I had little business cards made up that said it was something really simple, like you want to report an absence, text out to the TeamSense number. And so what that let them do is they just tucked it into their badge. And so, right, I don't have one, but like in my badge holder, you can tuck a business card size thing right in there.
Oh,
Um,
smart.
so,
Yeah, that's
so,
really
so
smart.
there's no excuse to not have it, really.
Yeah.
Um, and then what we did after that is I had imported everybody's phone number, so the system already knew who they were. Of course, we had some percentage, I don't know, 20% of employees not have their most up to date cell phone number or something like that in there. So there was a little bit of hand holding, walking around, over communicating, making sure that people were in and were all set and had tried it out. But after the first, I want like 3 or 4 weeks of just doing that and getting the rough edges rounded off. The only discussions that I've had about TeamSense since then has just been, this person moved from here to there, the implementation that we're working on with ADP, which is kind of cool. And then some expansion of how we're using TeamSense. And we'll get into that in a sec, but we're using it actually starting this week for overtime in a certain department to tell a group of employees what the hours are going to be and have them report back to us which days they're going to work the overtime hours, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That's super Go ahead, Adam.
So it's like, well, a webinar here where, I don't want to gloss over any of the potential challenges. Like, I think that, it's important to think about and talk about some of the places where you ran into a little bit of friction. Andy, I think you started down that path a little bit. So you said that, there was some instances where the phone numbers that you had loaded for employees in TeamSense were out of date. And
Yep.
so did you walk them through how they could input their badge ID or their employee ID to update their contact information?
Yep. So that's actually a super important thing to go through. So when we were taking a look at how employees are uniquely identified, the way that employees clock in and out is they have an employee number. They punch that number into our time clock, and then they use their finger, and that's their punch. And so the key for all of our employees was their employee number. And so basically, what the way that we communicated to make sure that everybody knew that was, okay, the first time you text TeamSense, if it knows who you are, great. If it doesn't know who you are or doesn't recognize your phone number, the only thing that you need to know is that number that you punch in every single day, 4 times when you're clocking in and out, that everybody has burned into their skull, because that's your unique identifier. Once it's identifies you based on that, it'll know who you are, and then TeamSense gives you the option. Hey, do you want to update your number in the system with the number that you just texted with or not? And so it was relatively simple to get that all ironed out. Now, I'm not going to lie, Adam. The first couple of weeks, I did spend more time than usual walking around, talking up TeamSense, making sure that nobody was having issues. And I did have some early adopters that were helping me with that. So they were kind of the people in certain departments that I could point others to and say, okay, if you're having a problem, I can help you. But if I can't help you right now, you can go see this other person because they were successful. And if they help and you're good, perfect. If not, that's okay. Come find me or I will find you later.
And these were not supervisors; these were like frontline
Yep,
hourly folks. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. My style is, I spend my whole day out on the floor, so I'm approachable. I know everybody's name, and so that helped in the implementation. If I was the guy from the corporate office coming down and doing this thing, that would not have worked.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I think
true.
that shows just a level of care and consideration, for your group of employees. I kind of think of you as like a conductor of an orchestra. It's not just about like how many people are on the floor, but who's on the floor. I think of like, oh, I got a violinist that's out. I got to replace him with a cello. Oh God, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think the way that you think through this, it is very much like an orchestra. Beautiful music.
If I'm the only guy that shows up to work, we're screwed.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. So in terms of kind of employee adoption in general, it sounds like again you had some people that were early adopters, which is fantastic. Um, how long would you say it kind of took you in terms of really seeing that change management take place to where you are today?
So we had very good coverage in the first month, and then it was basically seamless after 6 weeks or 2 months, maybe.
Yeah.
I just remember the first time that we pulled everybody together and had all hands. There was one guy in shipping, and Adam, I don't know if I told you this or not,
No,
but
this is new.
so he's older guy in shipping, and there was expletives in his comment, but it was basically, I will retire before I do anything other than call the guard. There was a couple other guys in shipping that are younger and a little more tech savvy and whatever, and they got him hooked up and got him set up. And guess who actually called out using TeamSense? It was like a month later, and it
That
shocked
text
me because
texted out. He used the
I
text,
texted out. He
not the
texted
phone
out,
call
not
function.
even the voice. He
Wow,
texted. Yep, yep.
that's impressive. Here's a good question. Does your guard appreciate having Team Sense now that he doesn't have to deal with all these call-ins?
So for him, like my supervisors, it's one less thing on his plate. And then for my
Huh,
supervisors, it's one less, like they don't have to stop and see the guard and say, all right, who called out today? Who's my person? Who's not my person? It just, in that shift startup for them, it makes it one less thing. And then for the guard, it's just one less thing that they've got to worry about,
yeah,
which that's valuable.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
we've got another pretty big win coming for supervisors as well, because I think, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, supervisors are the ones that are updating TNA or time cards every day, maybe, or every week if they don't get to it. What's your round number gut on how many hours that takes for supervisors in a week to update time cards for their employees?
It's a non-zero number, and like it depends, right? When it snows, it's a total disaster, and you got to deal everybody's time card. Normal week, not a lot of vacation, not a huge deal. but it's probably at least an hour or so of dedicated sit down and make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on the time
Per
cards, because
supervisor.
per
Yeah,
supervisor,
yeah.
because the one thing that you don't want to do is mess up people's pay, so it's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
Especially not in the union environment. And so when we wrap up this integration, that goes away, at least in large part. So all of the call off or absences reported through TeamSense are going to automatically populate on time cards. So I'm imagining supervisors are still going to probably take a peek, just for there to be checks and balances, but all of that information is automatically going to sit there. I'm looking forward to going through that process as well, and kind of regrouping again and figuring out what the supervisors think of that. Because I think, get like you said it, Andy, I spend my time on the floor. Like, value is not added in the fishbowl. Value is not added often, right? Sitting at a desk doing things like that. It's like, hey, we gotta be on the floor shifting people around or driving things, shoulder to shoulder to hit metrics, not sitting doing admin work.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, for supervisors, it's going to take it off their plate, and it's going to make it so they can manage the exceptions, which is, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Streamline the normal is another ops leader told me. Streamline the norm. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Control the
Because
control.
we got to focus on when things go wrong, right? Like, streamline the normal, so when there's a power outage, like, we can put our people there. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, so we could always talk for hours, as I always say in these webinars, but I want to kind of talk a little bit. We hinted at it here, Andy. So beyond call out shift planning, what other use cases have you found for TeamSense? Anything valuable? Uh, whether it's dealing with emergencies or anything of that sort.
Yep. So the one cool thing about TeamSense, and this is one where I'm going to say it out loud, and some people are going to look back and say, that seems like it maybe is a pitfall too. But the one cool thing about TeamSense is it knows everybody's name and phone number. The cool thing about that is we can push communications too. So we had a situation before TeamSense where TeamSense would have been super useful, where there was, of all things, there was a shooting on the street in front of our factory. Like, never happens. We're not in a bad part of town or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the road was quite literally blocked off, and nobody knew how to get in. And the police were telling people, you're not going to be able to get in here all day long. You should just go home. When the reality is, okay, you go in the back entrance and you can sneak around to the employee parking lot. And we directed some people that way. But that was a time where being able to push a communication first thing in the morning to a lot of people would have been super useful. What we're doing right now in our cylinders department is we are using it. I think I said this before, to notify everybody in that department what the hours for their work area is. And then we've got a form that they fill out and goes back to the supervisor over there of what days they're going to work the overtime. That's to address a specific issue about, and if you've worked in a union environment, about everybody being offered overtime consistently and fairly. So that's solving a problem over there for them, where they'll have a record of what was offered and then what was accepted or refused.
And for folks that are listening that aren't as familiar with TeamSense, form through TeamSense, like a digital form through text message, not a clipboard piece of paper form that they're filling out and handing to their supervisor. So text messages are going out saying, hey, here's the overtime hours available for this week, and then employees are actually clicking to say what their availability is. So you've given them awareness, they're communicating back their availability for shift planning or for labor planning, and all of that's happening through a quick workflow through text message as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other question too, again, we talk with a lot of HR managers. Have you seen any avenues for HR use cases for TeamSense around like policy, sharing policies, or employee engagement tactics?
Yeah, we haven't gone down those paths yet. But we still, Adam's been bugging me, and I still have some things on my mind where we can probably use the communication side of things to do more. It's probably not going to be policies, just that doesn't really fit the way that our communications with our employees works. That type of thing, again, biggest small company, that type of thing is usually a little bit more of an intimate setting, whether it's me getting together with my folks or doing it all hands or something like that. That's where we do policy type communication.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so we'll see. But if it came up like, I actually just had an email pop up. Our employee picnic is next week. It's on July 3rd. So that would be an opportunity to just ping everybody the day before. That's like, hey, don't pack your lunch. Remember, picnic tomorrow. Something like that.
There you go.
Where so
Yeah, we've had people use it in other orgs where, let's say you have an employee picnic, they can send out a survey form and people can sign up to bring stuff, or we've seen stuff like that. Another fun story we've heard is we had a company that sends out a survey every week and they take a vote of what Pandora station they want to listen to on the floor. And so that's, it's like really simple things that are cool. And, the fact that TeamSense can also support that beyond just the attendance tracking piece is valuable. So we'll keep chatting
Fun.
about it.
Yeah, and Andy, I'll bring some use cases back to you. Lori, who's the HR director, HR manager for the accessories group, is deploying with a handful of her like Rockwood and Pepco sites. And so I'll bring some of her HR mind and workflows and insights back to you, and we can kick those around and see if any fit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, love it. Okay, well, hey, it's 11:11. Make a wish. I'm joking, but we are nearing the end of our time. I just want to make sure we have some time for some Q&A. I'm gonna throw our slides back up here. So yay Q&A. But before we jump into Q&A, I do want to highlight the fact that we will be having a webinar on July 9th. Next week's July 2nd. Like you said, it's kind of a big vacation week, so we're skipping our week, and so we'll be reconvening on the 9th. So we're going to be talking about the critical role of frontline leaders in transformational change. We're going to be joined by Manoj Mota. So he is the Director of Continuous Improvement at Avalon Technologies. He's going to be chatting with our CEO and co-founder, Sheila Stafford. He wrote this incredible article that was featured in Industry Week about how really senior level managers, CHROs, operations managers should really be taking a look at how they can really work with their frontline leadership if they want to implement change. A lot of the times they're overlooked, and so he has a lot of critical evidence of how important it is. So we'll be talking through that as well. So we'd love for you to join us again, July 9th. And then, of course, if you ever want to get in touch with us here at TeamSense, we recommend checking a look at a demo if you want to see it for yourself. Selfishly, I produce these webinars, so I love when people join our webinars too. So if you ever want to come to a future webinar or you want to see the recording of this one or any past content, you can come to teamsense.com/webinars. Okay, let's hop into a little bit of Q&A here. We did have a couple of questions come through. Some of them we had already answered. We had one that said, how smooth was the transition for your employees when you adopted TeamSense? We covered that as well. This one we kind of briefly brushed upon. This one says, if people need to call in, can they still do that with TeamSense, like with the phone instead of a text message too? We talked about how some people there's kind of that generational gap with technology. You have the early adopters and the not so early adopters. Some people still have a flip phone. What are ways that people can still communicate with TeamSense? And either Andy or Adam, welcome to answer to this question.
The people want to hear you, Andy.
There you go. So, I mean, the way that I would say it is you can text and that's easy, or you can call in and it's basically, it's a robot reading the same prompts and then you just press a button for what selection you want. It works fine. But honestly, I thought that we were going to have a contingent that was going to hold out on texting. I don't remember the last time that anybody has used the voice call, to be perfectly honest, because the texting is so easy.
Yeah. Love to hear it. Well, that's fantastic. And like we mentioned too, we do get a lot of questions around, texting with different languages. Absolutely can do, and it will translate back to the original texter's language. And then let's say it texts it to Andy, he'll receive in English. So, and again, over 25 languages is what TeamSense is able to communicate with as well. So that's another really awesome thing about TeamSense too, is just lowering that barrier for communication entry if people have a different language. Okay,
Spanish, English, and Polish are our three big ones.
Okay, you said Spanish, English, and Polish are yours. Okay, yep, that we see Spanish very commonly. I'm from Texas, so obviously a lot of Spanish speakers here too. So I hear you on that one. Okay, well, hey, it's 11:15. We are at time. Like I said, we could talk for hours. And Andy, we are so grateful for your time and your experience as an operations manager, general manager. You have a wealth of knowledge, and I know that I learned a ton today, and I'm sure our audience did as well. We really appreciate it. Um, Adam, thank you for your time as well. I always enjoy hanging out with you any opportunity I can. So thanks so much for sharing your knowledge as well. But we are at time. Thank you again to everybody that joined us today. And again, if you want to revisit this content, we will be emailing out the recording, so you'll receive it. And then also you can go to teamsense.com/webinars or also get in touch with us too if you want to see a demo. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Hope y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday. Andy, good luck to your son on his baseball game. He will kill it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Everybody pull for Andy's son. He's playing in a baseball finals tonight. So cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great
Thanks,
rest of
guys.
your day. Take care.
See ya.
Bye bye.